Hi everyone, in this video we are going to dive into section 7.2, which is all about looking at these new functions in the Tidyverse, which are group by, summarize, and filter. So we're going to get a deep dive on these three functions. So the Tidyverse also gives us access to a group by operation. So for the column or columns that we select for a group by statement, R is going to look at the unique values or combination of unique values within those columns, and perform an operation within each of these groups of data. So this is a fairly more of a complex topic or subject, so we're going to walk through a couple pretty easy examples so we can visualize actually what's going on behind the scenes here. So let's see a quick example with a made-up data frame. So I just made up this player data frame here. So you'll see that we have 8 observations. So we have 2 with the position PF, 2 with the position PG, 2 centers, and then 2 positions with SG here. And you'll notice that these players have an associated number of points and also an associated number of assists. So this is the data frame we're going to use to visualize what's going on in a group by statement. So let's group by each unique value for the position variable. And within each of these groups, we're going to look at the average number of points and assists by these players. So essentially, a group by statement, if I apply a group by statement to this position variable, and I'm looking down in the console here at the position variable. So if I apply a group by statement to this variable, essentially R is going to look at the unique values. So we have 4 unique values in this case. We have PF, SG, PG, and C. So it's going to look at each of these values individually. And first it's going to look at the PFs, and it's going to compute the mean points and mean assists. Then it's going to go to the next group and the next group and so on, and we return these as sort of a summarization set of data. So to perform my group by, I'm going to say player data with my pipe operator. I'm going to say group by the position variable. So notice that itself is going to group by, create these 4 unique groups. And in order to compute the mean, I need to include those inside of a summarise function. So I'm going to use another pipe operator and say summarise. So inside of summarise, we need to essentially talk about the aggregation that you'd like to perform. So the first one, I want to take the average of points. And we know how to do that is just by taking mean of points. The second aggregation I want to do is looking at the average assists. So to do that, I take the mean of the assists variable. So it's doing that with respect to all the elements in that particular group. So it's going to do that 4 separate times for us in this example. So when I say mean points and mean assists, that is creating a new variable inside of this grouped data frame or summarization data frame. So that's the reason for this. And we just want to make sure that this is a descriptive sort of variable name so we know what it means after the group by statement. So now I'm going to run this and expand this console a bit. So the first position it looked at were centers. We see an average points of 11.5 and average assists of 1.5. So where are these numbers coming from? So now let's go back to our original data. We see the first center scored 10 points and the second one scored 13 points. Obviously, the average between those, 11.5. So that's where this value is coming from here. The first player had 0 assists and the second center had 3 assists. So the average between those two is 1.5. So that's where these numbers are coming from in this sort of group by aggregation. And you'll notice that the number of observations that we have in our summarization data frame is equal to the number of unique values in our position variable. So that's how this works. And again, we can look at another example. Let's look at position of PF. So we have one scored 25 points and the next scored 40 points. So the average of those two is going to give us 32.5. The first one scored or had 7 assists, and the next had 2 assists. So the average between those is 4.5 right here. So that's where we're getting these computations from. So that's essentially what's going on inside of this group by statement. So we see that R has grouped the data by looking at the values within the position variable. Then we took the average based on the data points which fell into each distinct group. So group by is the function that allows for the data to be grouped, and it is often paired with the summarization or the summarize function, which allows for us to perform a computation within each data group. So the group by does the grouping itself. The summarization or the summarize function is what allows us to summarize the results from each of these groups. So you'll also note that summarize and summarise are going to be equivalent in the Tidyverse here. So summarize spelled with an S versus summarize spelled with a Z. They actually do the exact same thing, so it's okay to use either one. So the next function that we're going to get into is the filter function. So this function is how we subset our data in the Tidyverse. That is, get rid of some rows that we don't want in the data frame and keep the desired rows that we do want. So that's what we're going to use the filter method for. And these, again, are going to be based on a certain condition that we are going to apply. So first, let's look at our player data again. I just want to bring it up here in the console. So now, we're going to apply the filter function for a couple different options here. So the first example I chose is to select only the players of the center position. So they have a position of C. And to do that, I'm going to take my data frame, I'm going to apply the pipe operator, and then I'm going to say filter. And inside of your filter function, you have to specify a condition. So again, a condition is something that returns a Boolean value, either true or false. So I want to say, I want position to be equal to C. So essentially, R is going to go into the position variable, and it's only going to extract the rows where position is equal to C. So let's run this, and you'll see that the resulting data frame only has the data for the two centers. So we have the first center with 10 points and the second with 13 points. So that's how we can apply this filter. And you'll notice that this also works for sort of a numerical condition also. So in the next example, we want to select only the players who scored 30 points or more in this hypothetical game. So I'm going to say player data with my pipe operator. I'm going to apply filter, and I'm going to say my condition is going to be points greater than 30. So let's run this, and we'll see that we also only get two observations returned from this data frame. We get the first point guard with 32 points, and we have the power forward with 40 points. So that's how we can apply this filter method to sort of select only the rows that we want based on a certain condition. So filter can also take more than one filtering condition. So for the intersection of two groups, we're going to use a comma. And for the union of two groups, we're going to use this sign here, which is this sort of vertical bar. So if you're not familiar with the intersection versus the union, I think this next example is going to be really helpful to understand sort of the logic behind these two things. So let's see an example and distinguish between these two cases. So the first one is using a comma. So again, this is talking about the intersection of two groups. So I'm going to select my player data frame, and I'm going to apply two different conditions inside my filter. The first one, I'm going to say, okay, I want players who scored more than 30 points. That's my first condition. I also want only point guards. I only want my position to be equal to PG. So now when I run this, I get one return value. So I have one point guard, he scored 32 points. So this was the only player who satisfied both of the conditions that I laid out right here. So if you look here, we had two players equal to point guard. The first one scored 28 points, and the second one scored 32 points. So he is going to be returned. The second point guard is not going to be returned because they didn't satisfy this first condition, which was scoring more than 30 points. So that's the intersection. So that is saying this condition and the next condition must be satisfied. Now let's get into the idea of the OR argument, or the union of these two arguments. So I'm going to use the exact same syntax here. I'm going to say my player data, my pipe operator, apply filter. I'm going to use the exact same two conditions. So I want greater than 30 points, but this signals to R that one of these conditions must be satisfied. At least one must be satisfied. And then I also am going to say position is equal to point guard. So now when I run this, you'll see that we now get three observations, or three players returned. And the reason is because when we put this vertical bar, this is R is essentially asking, okay, was this player's points more than 30? If that's false, let's look at the next one. Is his position, or is their position, a point guard? If that's true, okay, let's return it. So you'll notice that not every player scored more than 30 points to be included in this group. Also, not every player is a point guard. We see one power forward who scored 40 points, But the reason he's included now in this data frame is because he satisfied the first condition, which was scoring more than 30 points. So that's the difference between this sort of intersection and the union of two groups in terms of this filter variable. And again, we use that through the comma and then by this vertical bar. So how are these resulting data frames different from one another? We see how this is using the intersection logic, and this one is using the union logic. So now we're going to combine these functions into a single example. So I'm going to grab NBA box score data from the 2022 season using the hoop-r package. So let's run this. So again, we've seen this data frame a lot. This is what it looks like. We see game information for all these different NBA games. So here we are going to combine all of these things into a single statement. We're going to use select, filter, group by, and summarize. So here's what I want to accomplish in this statement. I want to select only a few important columns, only the most important columns. I'm going to keep only the New York-based team. So that's going to be the Knicks and the Nets. Then I want to compute a season-long average for points, assists, and blocks per game. And it seems like a daunting task, but we're going to be able to do it with the functions we just learned. So I'm going to start off with my NBA box score data frame, use my pipe operator as usual. The first, we're asked to select only the most important columns. So I'm going to select team display name, team winner, team score, assists, and blocks. And you'll notice that I'm going to rename a couple of them. I'm going to just say team and win because these names are a little long for me. And also points is going to be team score. So that's my select statement. If I run just this, we're going to see that this works, and it's selecting these 5 columns right here. So these are the columns we're interested in. Now let's move on to our next task, which is only to keep the New York-based teams. So I'm going to say apply my filter. So I'm going to use a pipe operator with my filter function, and I want to select where the team is equal to New York Knicks or the team is equal to the Brooklyn Nets. You'll notice that if I used the comma here, we would actually get nothing at all because no team is going to be called the New York Knicks and the Brooklyn Nets. Each team only has one name, so we need to use the or condition here, which is the vertical bar. So once I have this data, let's see what it looks like. So you'll notice that for the 2022 season, we have every Brooklyn Nets game and every New York Knicks game left in this data frame. So next I want to group by my team variable, and I want to compute a few new statistics within each of these groups. So I want to look at the season-long average for points, assists, and blocks per game. Okay, so inside of my summarize function, first I'm going to compute the number of games that they played, and to do that I just use n with my 2 parentheses like Paul has talked about. Next, I want to look at how many wins they had inside of these games. And to get wins, I'm going to actually take the sum of the win column. Right here in the console, we can see that win indicates if they won the game. So false is they lost, and true is they won. So I'm going to sum those. My mean points is when I take the mean of the points variable. Same thing for assists, and same things for blocks. So now when I run this statement in its entirety, this is the output. So we see that we have selected only these 5 or 6 columns that we are interested in. We filtered to only include the New York-based teams. We grouped by each team and computed the stats. So we see the total number of games played, the total number of wins, the average points, assists, and blocks per game for each of these teams. So inside the summarize, so just a quick note, inside of the summarize step, we also included the n and then the n function, or these parentheses. So this notation, which counts the number of rows within each group following a group by statement. So that's going to be important for us moving forward. It's a very convenient function. So again, that's how we can combine all these things inside of one operation to perform whatever sort of data wrangling we would like to see. So we can also include a filter following a group by statement, which can be a really useful application. So I want to see a quick example of this. So I'm going to take the NBA box score data frame. I'm going to select the same columns that I was interested in, and I'm going to group by team in this case. And then I'm going to, inside of my group by, I'm going to apply a filter. So I'm going to say, so essentially R is going to group by my team variable. So now, however many teams there are in the NBA, I can't keep up, 30, 32, something like that. We're going to look at each individual team, and then we're going to ask, are the points for this game played by this team greater than their average number of points scored in that season? So if the answer is yes, we're going to keep them. If the answer is no, we're going to get rid of them. So that's what we're doing inside of this filter. And then you'll notice that we're going to apply the ungroup method, which ungroups our data and puts it back into sort of its original structure. So I just wanted to quickly go over this. So now we see some different results here in terms of our data frame. So for instance, it's not as long as it was previously. Here we have just over 1,300 rows, which is much shorter than it was. And the reason is because we filtered out games where the team scored less points than their average points. So that's how we can use a filter inside of a group by, which as we progress through this course, you'll see that that's actually a very convenient function, especially for computing different statistics and filtering our data properly. So in this example, we grouped by team and filtered out the games where the team scored less than their average number of points over the course of the season. So that's going to wrap up this video. In the next video, we're going to look at the last couple functions from the Tidyverse and then get into some applied tutorial questions. So with that, thanks. See you in the next video.